Hello friends, welcome back. In this tutorial, we will study about first fit, best fit and worst fit strategy. In contiguous memory allocation, when variable partition scheme is implemented, then a set of free holes of various sizes are scattered throughout memory. Now we have a problem. How to satisfy a request of size n from list of free holes. Now what happens? The first fit, best fit and worst fit. These are the most commonly used strategies to select a free hole from a list of available holes. Now what happens in first fit strategy? In first fit strategy, whenever there is a request of size n, then in this case the first hole which is big enough is allocated, right? And the searching can start either from the beginning of the set of holes or at the location where previous first search ended. It will be clear after this example. Now consider that there is a request of size 10 MB, right? And what happens in this case? The searching will start at the beginning of the set of holes, right? Now the first hole is of size 5 MB, second hole is of size 2 MB, and third hole is of size 15 MB, and fourth hole is of size 10 MB, right? And request is of size 10 MB, right? So here we are using this first fit strategy, right? And here searching is started at the beginning of the set of holes. So what happens? First, this hole will be analyzed, which is of 5 MB, right? So this hole is not large enough to satisfy this request. Then we will check the second hole. The second hole is of 2 MB and it is not large enough to satisfy the request. Then we will check the third hole. Third hole is of 15 MB, right? So what happens? In this case, this hole is large enough to satisfy this request, right? So this hole will be allocated, right, which is of 15 MB, right? Now what happens in best fit? In best fit, what happens? The smallest hole that is big enough is allocated, right? So whenever there is a request of size n, the smallest hole that is big enough is allocated. Suppose here we have these holes, right? One is of 5 MB and one is of 15 MB, one is of 12 MB and one is of size 16 MB, right? And there is a request of size 10 MB, right? So here we will find the smallest hole which is big enough for the request, right? Request is for 10 MB. So here you can see this hole which is of size 12 MB, right? It is the smallest hole which is big enough for this request. So this hole which is of 12 MB, it will be allocated to satisfy the request. Now consider the worst fit, right? Now what happens in worst fit strategy? In worst fit strategy, whenever there is a request of size n, in that case the largest hole will be allocated to satisfy the request. Now see, suppose there is a request of size 10 MB and in memory there are holes of size 2 MB, 11 MB, 18 MB and 15 MB. So in this worst fit strategy, what happens? The largest hole is allocated to satisfy the request, right? So the largest hole which is large enough, right, to satisfy the request is allocated to satisfy the request. Here the largest hole, it is of 18 MB, right, and it is large enough to satisfy the request which is of size 10 MB. So this largest hole, right, among the free available holes, right, it will be allocated to satisfy the request.